Long ago, in a small coastal village, there lived a young fisherman named Daniel. At 25 years old, Daniel had already faced more hardships than most people experience in a lifetime. He had lost his father when he was just a boy, and ever since then, he had worked tirelessly to support his aging mother. Every morning before sunrise, Daniel would wake up, repair his fishing nets, and head out to sea. Life was simple, but it was never easy. Some days the catch was good, and some days he returned home with almost nothing. Yet despite all the struggles, Daniel never complained. He believed that hard work and patience would eventually bring better days. The people in the village admired him. They knew he was kind, honest, and always willing to help others. But deep inside, Daniel often wondered why life seemed so unfair. One winter evening, dark clouds began to gather over the ocean. The wind grew stronger with every passing hour. Birds flew inland, and the sea became restless. Then, without warning, a terrible storm struck the village. Massive waves crashed against the shore. Fierce winds tore roofs from houses. Fishing boats, which had taken years to build, were destroyed within minutes. Families watched helplessly as everything they had worked for disappeared before their eyes. By the time the storm ended, the peaceful village had become a place filled with sorrow and despair. People stood among the ruins with tears in their eyes. Some had lost their homes. Others had lost their only source of income. Many believed there was no future left for them there. "We should leave," some villagers said. "There is nothing left here. The sea has taken everything from us." Even Daniel felt hopeless. Years of hard work had been wiped away overnight. Looking at the broken boats and damaged houses, he wondered if perhaps everyone else was right. Maybe it was time to give up. As days passed, sadness spread throughout the village. The laughter of children disappeared. Neighbors spoke less and less. Hope itself seemed to have vanished. But every evening, as darkness covered the sky, Daniel noticed something strange. On top of a hill overlooking the sea stood a small cottage belonging to the village's old lighthouse keeper, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas was nearly 80 years old. His white beard and gentle smile were familiar to everyone in the village. Although the storm had brought destruction all around him, the old man continued a routine that puzzled Daniel. Every evening, just before sunset, Mr. Thomas would step outside his cottage and light a small lantern. The tiny flame glowed softly against the darkness. Night after night, Daniel watched the warm light shining from the hill. He couldn't understand it. Everything had changed. People had lost hope. Many were preparing to leave. And yet, somehow, the old man continued to light that little lantern, as if he knew something that everyone else had forgotten. Finally, unable to contain his curiosity, Daniel decided to climb the hill and ask him why. As Daniel reached the top of the hill, he found Mr. Thomas sitting quietly beside the lantern, watching the waves in the distance. Despite everything that had happened, the old man's face was calm and peaceful. Daniel sat beside him and asked, "Mr. Thomas, why do you keep lighting that lantern? It is too small to stop the storm. It cannot rebuild the boats or restore what we've lost." The old man smiled gently. Then he looked at Daniel and said, "You're right, my son. This lantern cannot stop the storm." He paused for a moment. "But it can remind people that the light still exists." Daniel remained silent. Mr. Thomas continued, "Life has never promised us freedom from storms. Every person faces darkness sooner or later. But when people stop believing in light, that is when they truly become lost." The old man's words touched something deep inside Daniel. "Hope doesn't remove suffering," Mr. Thomas said softly. "It simply gives us the strength to walk through it." For a long time, Daniel sat quietly, staring at the small flame. It was only a lantern, and yet somehow it refused to surrender to the darkness around it. That night, Daniel returned home with a different feeling in his heart. The storm had taken many things away, but perhaps it had not taken everything. The next morning, instead of sitting in despair, Daniel picked up his tools and began repairing broken fishing nets. Some villagers watched him in confusion. Others shook their heads. But Daniel kept working. Soon, an elderly fisherman approached him. "Can you help me fix mine too?" he asked. Daniel smiled. Of course. Over the next few days, he helped anyone who needed assistance. He repaired nets, shared food with struggling families, and encouraged those who had lost hope. At first, only a few people joined him, but slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Neighbors started helping neighbors. Families shared what little they had. Men worked together to rebuild boats. Women cooked meals for those in need. Children laughed again. The village had not fully recovered, but hope had returned. And with hope came strength. Months passed. Little by little, life began to return to normal. The sea became calm once again. Boats returned to the water. Homes were rebuilt, and the village that once seemed lost slowly came back to life. Daniel often climbed the hill to thank Mr. Thomas. But one evening, something felt different. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Daniel noticed that the lantern on the hill was no longer shining. Concerned, Daniel hurried toward the cottage. As he entered the small home, he found Mr. Thomas lying peacefully in his bed. Beside him were old photographs, a worn Bible, and the lantern that had inspired an entire village. Mr. Thomas had passed away quietly in his sleep. News of his passing spread quickly. The entire village mourned the loss of the kind old lighthouse keeper who had never stopped believing in hope. For several days, sadness filled everyone's hearts. But then, something extraordinary happened. On the evening after Mr. Thomas's funeral, a woman placed a lantern outside her home. Then, another family did the same. Soon another and another. Without being asked, people throughout the village began placing lanterns outside their homes. By nightfall, hundreds of tiny lights illuminated the darkness. Daniel stood on the hill and looked down in amazement. The entire village was glowing. Tears filled his eyes as he remembered the words Mr. Thomas had spoken months earlier. This lantern cannot stop the storm, but it can remind people that the light still exists. At that moment, Daniel finally understood. Mr. Thomas had never been trying to fight the storm. He had been protecting something far more important: hope. Years later, visitors who came to the village often wondered why lanterns still decorated every home. And the villagers would simply smile and tell them the story of an old lighthouse keeper who taught them that even the smallest light can overcome the dark. Because hope does not remove life's storms. It gives people a reason to keep moving through them. And sometimes, all it takes to change the world is one small light that refuses to go out. Moral: even the smallest light can inspire others when the world feels dark. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories.